Part 1. The Anomaly, the Salvage Ship. Quiet Dawn moved slowly through the darkness of space. It floated past broken rocks and twisted metal that had once been part of something bigger. Captain Zereth stood at the front window and watched the debris drift by like leaves in a slow river. She had been doing this work for 30 years. Her compound eyes, large and dark like polished stones, had seen the remains of 100 dead civilizations. Nothing surprised her anymore. At least, that is what she believed until today. Zyreth was a Valorian, a tall insect-like being with 4 arms and skin that looked like brown armor. Her crew of 12 worked quietly around her, scanning the debris field for anything of value. Most salvage runs produced nothing but scrap metal and disappointment. But the Council paid well for artifacts from the old times, and Zyreth needed the money. Lieutenant Kyle called out from his station. He was younger than the others, eager and sometimes too excited. His antennae twitched as he stared at his screen. "Captain, I am picking up something strange. There is a large object about 2,000 meters to our left. It does not match anything in our database." Zyreth walked over to look at his screen. The object was long and narrow, shaped like a seed pod. It was covered in some kind of metal that reflected their scanning beams in unusual ways. "What is it made of?" she asked. Kale ran more scans. His eyes widened. "Captain, this metal is very old. The computer says it is at least 2,000 years old, maybe older. 2,000 years. Zyreth felt something cold move through her body. That time period meant something. It was before the Great Silence, before half the galaxy went dark and stayed that way for decades. It was from the time of the humans. "Bring us closer," she ordered. The Quiet Dawn changed direction and approached the strange object. As they got nearer, Zyreth could see markings on its surface. Strange symbols that looked like nothing she had ever seen. The translation computer worked on them for several minutes before producing a single word. Horizon. "It is a ship," Kale said. His voice was barely a whisper. A human ship. The bridge went completely silent. Every member of the crew stopped what they were doing. Humans were not just ancient history. They were the most feared species in galactic memory. The stories said they had caused the Great Silence, that they had destroyed worlds and murdered billions before finally destroying themselves. No one had found an intact human vessel in over 500 years. Most believed none had survived. Zyreth made her decision quickly. "Prepare the cargo bay. We are bringing it aboard." Some of her crew looked at her with fear in their eyes, but no one argued. They had all signed contracts. They all needed the money the Council would pay for something like this. It took 3 hours to bring the human ship into the cargo bay. Up close, it was even stranger than Zyreth had expected. The metal was rough and simple, nothing like the smooth surfaces of modern vessels. There were no energy signatures, no signs of advanced technology. It looked primitive, like something a child might build. But it had survived 2,000 years in space. That was not primitive at all. Zyreth led a small team inside through a hole in the outer hull. The air was stale and dead. Their lights cut through darkness that had lasted longer than most civilizations. They found old equipment, strange devices covered in dust and ice. They found chairs designed for beings with only 2 arms and 2 legs. Then they found the pod. It was in a small room at the back of the ship, connected to a power source that glowed faintly blue. The pod was made of metal and glass, and frost covered its surface. Zyreth wiped away the frost with one of her 4 hands and looked inside. A human lay there, a male, based on the records she had studied long ago. He had pale skin and dark hair. His eyes were closed. His chest moved up and down in a rhythm so slow she almost missed it. He was breathing. He was alive. Zyreth stepped back so quickly she almost fell. Her crew gathered around her, all of them staring at the pod with a mixture of terror and amazement. "That is not possible," Kyle said. "The power source should have failed centuries ago. Nothing lasts that long." But there he was, a living human, frozen in time, sleeping through the death of his entire species and everything they had built. Xyreth found a small metal tag attached to the pod. She read the words slowly, her translator struggling with the ancient language. Daniel Grant, Chief Navigation Officer, Earth Colonial Fleet. Daniel Grant. She said the name in her mind several times. This was a human, a real human, not just bones or artifacts or scary stories told to children. A living member of the species that had supposedly brought ruin to the galaxy. She returned to the bridge and contacted the Galactic Council immediately. The response came faster than any message she had ever received from them. Usually, the Council took days or weeks to respond to anything. This time, they answered in hours. The message was short and direct. "Do not wake him. Transport him to Research Station Omega. Under no circumstances allow the human to regain consciousness. Further instructions will follow." Xyreth read the message 3 times. The Council was afraid. She could feel it in their words. They did not want this human to wake up. They wanted him to stay frozen forever, or perhaps they wanted him to die quietly in his ancient pod. She ordered her crew to change course for Research Station Omega, but as the quiet dawn turned toward its new destination, alarms began to sound from the cargo bay. Kyle was the first to check the monitors. "Captain, the pod is failing. The power source is dying. The human's vital signs are becoming unstable." Xyreth closed her eyes. The universe was giving her a choice. She could follow the Council's orders and let the human die. No one would blame her. The pod was old. Failures happened. The last human would simply stop breathing, and the galaxy would continue as it always had. Or she could save him. She could wake the monster from the old stories and face whatever consequences came next. She thought about the human's face, peaceful and unaware behind the frosted glass. He had not asked to be found. He had not asked to sleep for 2,000 years. He was just a man who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. "Prepare the medical bay," Xyreth said. "We are going to save him." Kyle stared at her. "The Council said not to wake him." "The Council is not here. I am. And I will not let someone die just because others are afraid of him." She turned to face her crew. "Move quickly. We do not have much time." As her crew rushed to obey, Xyreth walked back down to the cargo bay. She stood in front of the failing pod and watched the human's chest rise and fall. "I do not know what you are," she said quietly. "I do not know if you are a monster or just a man, but I am going to find out." The pod's lights flickered and died. The real work was about to begin. Part 2. The Awakening. Daniel Grant opened his eyes and saw only light. White, burning light that filled every part of his vision. His body felt like it was made of stone. Every muscle ached. His throat was dry and raw. And when he tried to speak, only a rough sound came out. Slowly, shapes began to form in the brightness. Faces appeared above him, but they were not human faces. They were strange and alien, with too many eyes or not enough, with skin that looked like stone or metal or glass. Daniel tried to move away from them, but his body would not obey. He remembered the alarms. He remembered the horizon shaking as something struck it hard. He remembered sealing himself in the emergency pod as the air rushed out of the ship. He had been certain he was going to die. But he had not died. He was here, wherever here was, surrounded by creatures from a nightmare. A voice spoke to him. The words sounded strange at first, like music played backward. Then something clicked near his ear, and the words became clear. "Please remain calm. You are safe. My name is Xyreth. I am the captain of the ship that found you." Daniel turned his head slowly and saw the speaker. She was tall and thin, with brown skin that looked like armor. She had 4 arms and 2 large eyes that reflected the light like dark mirrors. An insect, Daniel thought. A giant insect that talked. "Where am I?" His voice came out as a whisper. "You are on my ship, the Quiet Dawn. We found your vessel drifting in a debris field. You were in a sleeping pod. A cryogenic pod, I believe your people called them." Daniel tried to sit up. His arms shook with the effort, but he managed to raise himself a little. The room around him was made of smooth gray metal. Strange machines beeped and hummed nearby. Several other alien beings stood at a distance, watching him with expressions he could not read. "How long?" Daniel asked. "How long was I asleep?" Zyreth was silent for a moment. Her large eyes seemed sad, though Daniel did not know how he could tell that. "You have been asleep for approximately 2,000 years. The words did not make sense at first. Daniel's mind refused to accept them. 2,000 years. That was impossible. Cryopods were designed for decades, maybe a century at most. 2,000 years meant everyone he knew was dead. Earth was gone. Everything was gone. "You are lying," he said, but he knew she was not. Something in her voice, in the way the other aliens looked at him, told him this was the truth. Zyreth shook her head slowly. "I am sorry. I wish I could tell you something different. But your species, the humans, they are gone. They have been gone for almost 1,800 years. You are the last one." Daniel lay back down and stared at the ceiling. The last one. The last human in the entire universe. His family, his friends, his crewmates on the horizon, they were all dust now. Less than dust. They were nothing but faded memories in a galaxy that had forgotten they ever existed. The grief would come later. He knew that. Right now, he felt only emptiness, a hollow space where his heart should be. "What happened?" he asked. "What happened to my people?" The aliens in the room shifted uncomfortably. They looked at each other with something that might have been fear. Zyreth spoke carefully, choosing her words like someone walking through a field of broken glass. "There was an event. We call it the Great Silence. It happened approximately 1,800 years ago. Many worlds went dark. Many species died. When it ended, your people were gone. But what caused it? Was it a war? A disease?" Zyreth did not answer right away. Another alien, younger than her with nervous antennae, spoke instead. "The records say that humans caused it. The Great Silence was your fault. Your species destroyed itself and took many others with it." Daniel stared at the young alien. "That is not possible. We were explorers, scientists. We came to space looking for friends, not enemies." "The historical records are clear," the young alien continued. "Humans were aggressive and dangerous. They spread through the galaxy too fast. They made enemies everywhere. And in the end, they brought destruction on everyone." Daniel wanted to argue, but he did not have the strength. His body was still weak from 2,000 years of frozen sleep. His mind was struggling to process everything he had learned. He closed his eyes and tried to remember his crewmates. Linda Park, the ship's doctor, who laughed at terrible jokes. Sam Rodriguez, the engineer who could fix anything with wire and hope. They had been good people, kind people. They could not have been part of some galactic catastrophe. "I need to see these records," Daniel said. "I need to understand what happened." Zyreth nodded. "In time. For now you must rest and recover. Your body has been through a great deal." Over the following days, Daniel learned more about the galaxy he had woken up in. The Valorians, Zyreth's species, were one of dozens of intelligent races that lived among the stars. They had formed a galactic council that governed most of known space. Trade flourished. Wars were rare. It seemed like a peaceful and prosperous time. But underneath that peace, Daniel sensed fear. The aliens were afraid of him. They kept their distance. They watched him like he might suddenly attack. Even Xyreth, who had saved his life, seemed nervous around him. He asked her about it one evening when they were alone. "Your people have been the monsters in our stories for a very long time," she admitted. "Children are told to behave, or the humans will get them. We learn about the Great Silence in school. We are taught that humans were the most dangerous species ever to reach the stars." "And you believe that?" Xyreth was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know what I believe anymore. I have met you now. You do not seem like a monster. You seem like someone who has lost everything and is trying to understand why." Daniel looked out a small window at the stars drifting past. Somewhere out there, Earth had once been. A blue planet full of life and noise and hope. Now it was probably just another dead rock circling a dying sun. "I need to find the truth," he said. "I need to know what really happened to my people. Because the humans I knew, the humans I served with, they would never have destroyed worlds. They would have died trying to save them." Xyreth placed one of her 4 hands on his shoulder. It was a strange gesture from an alien, but somehow it felt comforting. "The Council is sending us to Research Station Omega. There are beings there who study the old times. Perhaps they can help you find your answers. And if the answers show that humans really were monsters?" Xyreth looked at him with her large, dark eyes. "Then we will deal with that truth together. But I do not think that is what we will find. I think the truth is something far more complicated than the stories we have been told." Daniel nodded slowly. He did not know what waited for him at this research station. He did not know if he would find comfort or more pain. But he knew he had to try. He was the last human, and if his species was going to be remembered as destroyers, he needed to know if that memory was true or just a convenient lie. The stars continued to drift past the window, cold and silent and very far from home. Part 3. The Truth Research Station. Omega was the largest structure Daniel had ever seen. It hung in space like a metal moon, circling a star that had died long ago. Ships from a dozen different worlds came and went from its many docking ports. Lights blinked across its surface like 1,000 watching eyes. When the quiet dawn arrived, armed guards were waiting for them. They put Daniel in restraints, metal bands around his wrists and ankles that hummed with energy. He did not fight them. He understood their fear, even if he did not share it. They took him through long corridors filled with beings of every shape and size. Some stopped to stare at him. Others hurried away like they had seen a ghost. Word had spread quickly. The last human was here. His cell was comfortable but clearly a prison. The walls were thick and the door had no handle on the inside. A small window let him see the dead star outside, its surface cold and gray. "This is fitting," Daniel thought. A dead man in a dead place, brought here to answer for the crimes of a dead species. Days passed. Scientists came to study him. They took samples of his blood and hair and skin. They asked him questions about human biology, human psychology, human history. Daniel answered what he could, but most of their questions made no sense to him. They seemed to think humans had been some kind of super predators, designed by evolution to conquer and destroy. They did not seem to understand that humans had been afraid too, that they had looked up at the stars and wondered if they were alone. Then, Volith came. Volith was unlike any being Daniel had met before. They were made of crystal, a living structure of purple and blue that caught the light and turned it into rainbows. They moved slowly, carefully, as if the world might break if they rushed. When they spoke, their voice sounded like wind chimes. "I am historian Volith," they said. "I have spent my entire existence studying the Great Silence. I have read every record, examined every artifact, listened to every surviving transmission. and I believe the official story is wrong. Daniel sat up straighter. Wrong how? Voleth moved closer to the glass that separated them. The Council teaches that humans caused the Great Silence, that your species became aggressive, turned on your allies, and started a war that consumed half the galaxy. But I have found things that do not fit this story. Transmissions that sound like warnings, not threats. Records of human ships rushing toward danger, not away from it. So what do you think really happened? Voleth was silent for a long moment. Their crystal body flickered with light, as if they were thinking deeply. I believe humans discovered something terrible, and I believe they tried to stop it, not start it. Daniel felt his heart beating faster. This was what he had hoped to find. Someone who questioned the easy answers, who looked for truth instead of comfortable lies. I want to see the records, he said. All of them. The original files from the time of the Great Silence. Voleth nodded slowly. I have requested permission from the Council. They are reluctant, but I believe they will agree. They want to understand you, Daniel Grant. They want to know if you are a threat or something else entirely. The permission came 3 days later. Daniel was brought to a large room filled with screens and strange machines. Voleth was there, along with several other scientists who watched from a safe distance. Zereth had been allowed to stay as well. She stood near the door, her 4 arms crossed, her eyes never leaving Daniel. The records were old and damaged. Many files were corrupted or incomplete, but slowly, piece by piece, a picture began to form. It started with human exploration ships finding something strange in a distant part of the galaxy. Energy readings that made no sense, planets that had been stripped of all life, a pattern of destruction that moved slowly but steadily through the stars. The humans had sent probes to investigate. Most never returned. The ones that did brought back images that made Daniel's blood run cold. Vast shapes moving through space. Larger than moons, darker than the void itself. Living things, or something that had once been living, ancient beyond measure and hungry beyond understanding. They called them the Silence, Voleth explained. The human records used that word over and over. The silence was coming. The silence could not be stopped. The silence would consume everything. Daniel kept reading. The humans had tried to warn their allies. They had sent messages to every species they knew, begging for help, pleading for a united defense. But the other species did not believe them. Some thought it was a trick. Others thought humans were simply afraid of shadows. By the time they understood the truth, it was too late. The silence reached human space first. Colony after colony went dark. Billions of people died in weeks. The human military fought back. But their weapons did nothing. The silence absorbed energy, adapted to attacks, kept coming no matter what was thrown at them. Then Daniel found the final records. A message from Earth itself, sent just hours before the planet went dark. The voice belonged to a woman. She sounded tired and afraid, but there was steel underneath her words. This is Admiral Nicole Hayes of the Earth Defense Fleet. To all species receiving this message, know that we have failed to stop the enemy. The silence cannot be defeated with the weapons we have. But we have found another way. We have discovered that the silence is attracted to concentrated life energy. They follow it, consume it, and then move on to the next source. We are going to use this against them. Every human ship, every human colony, every human world is going to light up like a beacon. We are going to draw the silence to us, make them focus everything they have on humanity. And while they are busy destroying us, we are going to hit them with everything we have left, not to kill them. We know we cannot do that, but to hurt them, to weaken them, to make them sleep. Please, when this is over, remember us. Remember that we chose this. We could have run, could have scattered across the galaxy and let the silence chase us forever. Instead, we chose to stand. We chose to give you time. Use it well. This is Admiral Hayes, signing off. Tell the universe that humanity was here, and tell them we were not afraid. The recording ended. The room was completely silent. Daniel realized there were tears running down his face. He wiped them away with shaking hands. Volith spoke softly. Your people did not cause the great silence. They ended it. They sacrificed everything to stop an enemy that could not be stopped any other way. Zyrith stepped forward. Her voice was rough with emotion. They saved us. They saved all of us. And we have hated them for it for 2,000 years. Daniel looked at the blank screen where the Admiral's message had played. She had been brave, whoever she was. They had all been brave. His people, his species, had faced the end of everything and chosen to meet it head-on. The Council needs to see this, he said. Everyone needs to see this. Volith nodded. I agree. The truth has been hidden long enough. It is time for the galaxy to know what humanity really was. Daniel stood up slowly. He felt different somehow. The grief was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Pride. His people had been heroes. And he was going to make sure the universe never forgot it. Part 4. The Return. The truth spread faster than anyone expected. Volith released the records to every news network in the galaxy. Within days, trillions of beings had seen Admiral Hayes delivering her final message. They had watched the evidence pile up, record after record showing that humans had not been destroyers, but protectors. The reaction was immediate and powerful. On some worlds, there were ceremonies of mourning. Beings who had grown up hating humans now lit candles and sang songs of sorrow. Monuments that had celebrated victory over the human threat were quietly removed. Schools began teaching a new version of history, one that honored sacrifice instead of spreading fear. But not everyone accepted the new truth. The Vorn were a proud species with long memories. Their homeworld had been destroyed during the Great Silence, turned to ash and rock by forces they had blamed on humanity for 18 centuries. They had built their entire culture around that hatred. Their children learned to despise humans before they learned to walk. Their leaders rose to power by promising to keep the galaxy safe from anything that resembled the human threat. When the records came out, the Vorn refused to believe them. This is a trick, declared High Commander Thresh, the leader of the Vorn military faction. The human has manipulated our historians. He has planted false evidence to make us drop our guard. We know what his kind did. We will not be fooled again. Thresh demanded that Daniel be executed immediately. He called for a vote in the Galactic Council, arguing that keeping the last human alive was too dangerous. Even if the new records were true, Thresh claimed, the human might still carry some ancient weapon or disease. Better to eliminate the risk entirely. The council was divided. Some members supported Thresh. Others believed the evidence and wanted to protect Daniel. The debates went on for weeks, growing angrier and more heated with each passing day. Daniel watched all of this from his room on the research station. He was no longer kept in a cell, but he was not free either. Guards followed him everywhere. Scientists still studied him constantly. He had become the most famous being in the galaxy, but he was also the most alone. Zyrith visited him often. She had resigned from salvage work and taken a position at the station, helping to organize the research into human history. She was one of the few people Daniel could truly talk to. The Vorn are planning something, she told him one evening. My contacts say there are extremist groups gathering. They do not trust the council to make the right decision. Daniel nodded slowly. He was not surprised. Hatred that had lasted for 1,800 years would not disappear overnight. Some wounds were too deep to heal with words alone. Maybe they are right to be afraid, he said. Maybe I am dangerous without even knowing it. Xyreth shook her head firmly. You are not dangerous. You are just a man who lost everything and somehow kept going. That is not something to fear. That is something to admire. The attack came 3 days later. Daniel was walking through one of the station's observation decks when the explosion hit. The floor shook beneath him. Alarms screamed. Through the windows, he could see a small ship pulling away, its weapons still glowing from the blast. Vorn extremists. They had tried to destroy the entire section of the station where Daniel lived. Guards rushed to protect him, but more attackers were already inside. They wore black armor and carried energy weapons. Their faces were twisted with rage. "Die, human!" one of them shouted. "Die like your people should have died!" What happened next surprised everyone, including Daniel himself. His body moved before his mind could catch up. He ducked under the first shot, grabbed a fallen piece of metal, and threw it with perfect accuracy at the attacker's weapon. He rolled to the side, came up running, and struck the second attacker in the throat before the alien could fire. The third attacker hesitated for just a moment, and that moment was enough. Daniel disarmed him and knocked him unconscious in 3 quick moves. The whole fight lasted less than 10 seconds. Daniel stood among the fallen attackers, breathing hard, his hands shaking. He did not know where those skills had come from. He had been a navigation officer, not a soldier, but somewhere deep in his body, buried by thousands of years of sleep, were reflexes that had kept his ancestors alive through countless dangers. The guards stared at him with wide eyes. So did the scientists who had come running at the sound of the explosion. Even Xyreth looked shocked. "I am sorry," Daniel said. "I did not mean to frighten anyone. I just reacted." One of the scientists, a small being with scales and 3 eyes, spoke in a trembling voice. "The old record said humans were dangerous, that they could fight like no other species. We thought it was exaggeration." Daniel looked down at his hands. "We were not built for war. We were built to survive. There is a difference." The assassination attempt changed everything. The Galactic Council moved quickly to condemn the Vorn extremists. High Commander Thresh was forced to apologize publicly or face sanctions against his entire species. The vote on Daniel's fate was postponed indefinitely. More importantly, the attack gave Daniel a chance to speak directly to the Council. He stood before representatives from 100 different worlds and told them about the humans he had known. "I was not a hero," he said. "I was just a navigator on a small ship. But I knew heroes. I knew people who worked long hours to help strangers. I knew people who risked their lives to save others. I knew a species that looked up at the stars and saw not enemies to conquer, but friends to find." He paused and looked around the vast chamber. "My people made mistakes. We were not perfect. But when the end came, when they faced something that could not be defeated, they did not run. They did not hide. They stood between the darkness and everyone else, and they burned themselves out to give you a chance. I am not asking you to worship them. I am asking you to remember them honestly. They deserve that much." The chamber was silent when he finished. Then, slowly, one representative began to clap. Then another. Then a dozen more. The sound built until it filled the entire room. Waves of applause from beings who had feared humanity for their entire lives. The council voted that day. Daniel was granted protected status. The historical records would be corrected. Humanity would be remembered not as a threat, but as a sacrifice. But Volith pulled Daniel aside after the celebration ended. The crystalline historian's voice was troubled. "The records show that the silence was hurt by what your people did, weakened, driven into some kind of hibernation. But they were not destroyed. They are still out there somewhere, sleeping in the dark between stars." Daniel felt a chill run through him. "Are you saying they might come back?" Volith's crystal body flickered with anxious light. I am saying that the galaxy might need humanity again someday, and right now, there is only one human left. Daniel looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, ancient horrors slept and dreamed of hunger, and somehow, impossibly, the fate of the galaxy might rest on his shoulders once more. Then I had better get to work, he said quietly. We have a lot to prepare for. Part 5. The Legacy. 5 years passed like water through open fingers. Daniel Grant worked every day from the moment he woke until long after most of the station had gone to sleep. There was so much to do and so little time. He was only human, after all. He would grow old. He would die. And when he was gone, humanity would truly be extinct. But he refused to let his people be forgotten. Working alongside Volith, Daniel pieced together everything humanity had learned about the silence before the end. The records were scattered and incomplete, but slowly a picture emerged. The silence were not natural creatures. They had been created long ago by some ancient civilization, weapons designed to wipe out life across the galaxy. That civilization was gone now, consumed by their own creation, but the weapons remained. They moved through the cosmos like a slow tide, sleeping for centuries and then waking to feed. Humanity had hurt them. The desperate final attack had damaged something vital, forced them into hibernation. But they were not dead. They were healing, slowly, in the cold, dark spaces between the stars. And one day, perhaps soon, perhaps in another 1,000 years, they would wake again. Daniel shared everything he learned with the Council. At first, many did not want to believe. It was easier to think the silence was gone forever, that the sacrifice of humanity had solved the problem permanently. But Volith's evidence was too strong to ignore. Slowly, the galaxy began to prepare. The Vorn were the biggest surprise. High Commander Thresh had been disgraced after the assassination attempt, but the Vorn people were not all extremists. Many of them had been shaken by the truth about humanity. They had spent 18 centuries hating the wrong enemy. Their grief had been pointed in the wrong direction. Some of them could not handle this revelation and retreated into denial. But others, especially the younger generation, chose a different path. A Vorn diplomat named Korath reached out to Daniel directly. He was young for his species, his scales still bright green instead of the darker color they would become with age. His family had lost dozens of members in the Great Silence. "I was raised to hate your kind," Korath said when they first met. "I was taught that humans were monsters who murdered my ancestors. Now I learn that your people died trying to save mine. I do not know how to feel about this." Daniel nodded slowly. "I think that is the right response. The truth is complicated. Your grief is real, even if it was pointed in the wrong direction. I would never ask you to forget what your family lost." Korath was silent for a long moment. "What would you ask?" "I would ask you to help me make sure it never happens again. I would ask you to take all that anger, all that pain, and aim it at the real enemy. The silence is still out there. They will come back someday, and when they do, I want the galaxy to be ready." Korath became one of Daniel's closest allies. The Vorn military, once the strongest voice calling for Daniel's death, transformed into the backbone of a new galactic defense force. They trained soldiers from a dozen species. They built ships designed to fight the silence. They turned their hatred into purpose. Zereth found her own way to honor humanity's memory. She traveled to the worlds that had once been human colonies, places that had been dead and empty for nearly 2,000 years. On each one, she installed a beacon, a simple device that broadcast a message in every known language. Here lived beings who chose to stand between the darkness and the light. Remember them. The beacons became pilgrimage sites. Ships from across the galaxy made journeys to see them, to float in orbit around dead worlds and think about what had been lost. Schools organized trips so children could learn about humanity, not from stories and records, but from the silence of places that had once been full of life. Daniel was present for the installation of the last beacon. It orbited Earth itself, the blue planet that had given birth to his species. The planet was still there, though changed beyond recognition. The oceans had turned gray. The continents had shifted. Nothing lived on its surface anymore. Daniel looked down at his homeworld through the window of Xerath's ship. He had never seen Earth from space before. He had been born on a colony world, far from the planet his ancestors had come from. But somehow, looking at it now, he felt connected to every human who had ever lived and died beneath those clouds. "I wish I could have seen it when it was alive," he said. Xerath stood beside him, her forearms folded across her chest. "I wish I could have seen any of your worlds when they were alive. I think they must have been beautiful." "They were. At least, I have been told they were." Daniel smiled sadly. "But maybe that is what makes them meaningful now. We only truly understand what something is worth after we have lost it." The years continued to pass. Daniel grew older. His hair turned gray, then white. His body became slower, weaker, but his mind stayed sharp, and he continued working until the very end. He died on a quiet morning, surrounded by beings who had become his family. Xerath was there, older now but still strong. Korath was there, his scales faded to a distinguished dark green. Volith was there, their crystal body singing soft notes of farewell. Daniel's last words were simple. "Tell them we were not afraid." The galaxy mourned as it had never mourned for a single being before. Trillions of voices spoke his name across 1,000 worlds. Ships gathered near the beacon above Earth, so many that they looked like a new kind of star from the surface below. They buried him in space, near the coordinates where the horizon had been found all those years ago. A small marker accompanied his body, bearing words in the old Earth language that Volith had helped to translate. "Here rests the last of humanity. They found him frozen in time. He was never meant to wake, but he did, and in waking, he reminded the universe what it means to be human." Xerath lived long enough to see the next generation grow up without fear of humanity. She watched children play games where they pretended to be human heroes, fighting back the darkness with courage and sacrifice. She watched scientists work to understand the technology humans had used in their final stand, hoping to improve it for the battle that might come. She died peacefully, knowing that Daniel's work would continue. And somewhere in the vast emptiness between galaxies, something stirred. It was slow, barely a ripple in the fabric of space. The wounds humanity had inflicted were almost healed. The hunger was returning. The sleep was ending. But the galaxy was different now. It was united in a way it had never been before. It had heroes to remember and a future worth fighting for. When the darkness came again, it would find not scattered species fighting alone, but a coalition forged in the memory of those who had given everything. The stars burned on, cold and bright and full of life. And in the hearts of beings across 1,000 worlds, the spirit of humanity burned alongside them. The story was not over. It was just beginning again.